The August meeting of the City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission is called to order. We definitely have a quorum today. Welcome, everybody. And today we have a very busy agenda. So we also have some unusual characteristics today. I'm filling in as Vice President. I'm filling in to begin the meeting for President. I shall open the meeting. I'm going to secure approval of the minutes from our prior meeting, and then I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Zerner, who's going to take us through the agenda. So if the commissioners Sullivan and Howard, excuse me, have had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting, let's start with the executive committee minutes. If you have no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I motion to approve.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? There we go. And now we're going to move to the regular meeting. May I have a motion to approve the regular meeting?
I have just one comment under number 1, old business. I think it's just a typo in the
number 1, old business.
In the first line.
Yep.
And Zwerner informed the commission that he has no received. It can either be now received or not received.
That should be not received. Yeah, thank you. And Jerry pointed that out to me before the meeting. I'll make sure it's corrected in the final version.
We didn't say anything, though, because we...
With that correction, I move approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
And all in favor, please, show of hands. They are approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Zerner, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. So the first thing I'd like to bring to the public attention is that we've unfortunately received the resignation of David Blunt as a member of this commission and as president of this commission. I want to publicly acknowledge, as I believe all the commissioners will agree, that David provided great leadership for this group over the last 2 years. He bleeds Lawrence through and through. His new job has just placed demands on him that makes it almost impossible. I think you should know that he has to take vacation off to attend our RDC meetings by the new job standards, as well as he's just overloaded and his young family's commitments. So David has submitted his resignation to the mayor. And I think that I would like to just go on the record in the minutes thanking David for all that he's done for this commission over the last 2 years. With that in mind, I'd like to personally welcome and introduce to the audience and to all present our 2 new members that were just sworn in moments ago by Kathy Walton. The first is Reggie Mcgregor. Reggie, we certainly welcome you and your addition to our group, and thank you very much for volunteering to serve the city, even though the mayor probably twisted your arm. And Jared Klein. Jared came to Lawrence, you might be interested in knowing, with his dad in the 80s. And Jared has served in the military, served at this base, and his wife continues to serve as a colonel in the Pentagon. And Jared, his kids are all in the military now, too. So we thank you and your family for your service, and we look forward to having you participate on this commission as well.
Thanks, Dan.
With that in mind, I would like to make the 2 of you comfortable in that you're going to be baptized by fire today with the heavy nature of this agenda. And at any point, if you're not comfortable in a vote, we will not look at an abstention as either positive or negative. If you wish to vote, we welcome that vote, but we don't want you to feel pressured to vote. We have 3 commission members here that fully know what's going on, and they can vote reflectively if you're not comfortable in doing so. With that in mind, we need to fill our slate of officers because of Mr. Blount's resignation for the period from today through 12/31 of this year. And while it's really unusual to do so, and I recognize fully that it's your decision as you pay me to help you get this commission keep it going and go through the motions, I'm going to make the recommendation of a slate of Jerry Clifford as president, Cheryl Sullivan as vice president, and Melissa Swindell as secretary-treasurer for the balance of this year. If you want to do something different, obviously you're the commissioners, it's up to you, but we need to take action on today, and that would be my recommendation. And I probably made that recommendation understanding that none of these commissioners will do that themselves. So I need somebody to make a statement one way or the other.
Well, I would certainly support,
I move approval of the slate as presented.
I would second that.
Mr. Recording Secretary?
Adam, do we need to vote on each of these individually, or does that satisfy the requirement, and that's just, if we hold one vote, we're good there?
Well,
That's fine.
Okay.
but you're okay with the, right? Okay, good. Thank you.
So all those in favor of the slate as articulated by Mr. Zerner, of Jerry Clifford as president, Cheryl Sullivan as vice president, and Melissa Howard as secretary, show of hands. Unanimous.
All right, the next thing I need to make this commission aware of and be sure you're comfortable going forward in this is that Mr. Murphy will be leaving the City of Lawrence's employment next week. He's accepted a job with Garmong Construction as an economic development specialist. His last official day with the city is the 17th. Garmong has offered to allow Joe to continue in his role of supporting the city as recording secretary of the RDC. And the city attorney, Caitlin Baller, and Adam Sturwell, sitting next to me as your redevelopment commissioner, have both agreed that there is no conflict as he is a city resident and that he is certainly available to remain in that capacity should you so desire. But I think I need affirmation one way or the other as to whether we need to secure a new recording secretary or you want to keep Joe on board.
Let me provide you that affirmation. I think Joe's done an excellent job. We are well served, and I'm glad he can stay on. And I believe the other commissioners would agree with that. Maybe not.
And the reimbursement would be,
There is no cost. There's no cost for Joe's services to be imposed.
thank you.
Good? Thank you very much. Good question.
Okay, Joe, you have the job forever. All right, the next order of business, I'm asking, I want to do this prior to asking for approval of claims and purchases, which is unusual, but I want our new counselors to realize we do have money in the bank before I ask you to approve for purchases. So I'm asking our city controller, Tyler Dowdett, who handles the RDC's finances. Let me make one other statement, if I will. I'm going to jump around this menu a little bit. It's my intention before we're done to schedule a new counselor commissioner orientation in the next couple of weeks. That's an agenda item here. So you understand where our money comes from, what we're looking at, what our obligations are. I know there's no way today you're going to be able to pick that up, but understand that that's coming. So I've asked Tyler to give just a very brief, considering how packed our agenda is, just a very brief snapshot for you of where we are today, and we'll give you a full snapshot or a full disclosure here in a couple of weeks when we have an orientation session. With that, Tyler, thank you for being here.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tyler Douthitz. I'm the city controller. You'll be seeing me occasionally, and then I've actually got my deputy controller here, Humphrey, as well. I'm going to do a very quick walkthrough. I believe Joe sent out the PDF.
We've got a physical packet as well. Yep.
I'm just going to focus on the cover page. That's just a summary that shows all of the primary 5 funds that you oversee. And really, Dan, actually.
Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Commissioners? Okay.
So, actually, Dan came to my office today with a couple of questions, so I'm glad he did, and I'll bring that up as well. There are 2 primary funds that you should be really focusing on, and that is the Fund 406, the Redevelopment Capital, and the Fund 407, the Redevelopment Bond Proceeds. Those are your 2, right now, at least, your 2 main operating funds.
Let me rephrase that and interrupt Tyler a little more clearly, as I often do. Those are the only 2 funds we can spend any money out of.
Correct. You will, on occasion, approve claims out of 410 just for the debt service issuance, but you cannot spend it on anything other than the debt that it's obligated to pay. So Fund 406, that one is in a healthy cash position. You can see at the end of June, we ended with 1.3 million, and then the bond proceeds, we just did those in May. I believe we got the proceeds in May, so it's a fresh fund with 2.1 million. So we have some cash to get some things done. And 408 and 409 are just the reserve funds that are required under those bond issuances. So
So when you total that, that comes to $3,554,928 that we have available to spend or utilize. To my knowledge, out of that, we do not have any big obligations at this point in time.
No, we just paid our last, I think the 3G obligation was the last major obligation I'm aware of. Well, I will say this, out of the 406, you pay the debt service on the original bonds issued.
Right.
From, was it 2000?
But as far as ongoing obligations that are really going to bleed this, that they need to be worried about, I'm not aware of any at the moment.
Right, yep. And to kind of tackle that as well, and we'll get into this in the orientation, but the TIF increment assessed value went up by 81%. So although you do have a recurring obligation of debt service, it's now going to be healthily covered under that increase. So that was really good.
18%, correct?
Now, the base value of the TIF went up by 10, but the increment itself went up by 81%.
Okay,
So
thank you.
that's significant. So everything you've been doing was captured in that, in those recent. So that's actually a testament to what the board here has done. So
Basically, I wanted you to hear from the controller that we have a really healthy cash balance, so the few bills we have to pay today shouldn't be a problem, and then in our orientation session, we'll help you get a full view of the finances. Is that satisfactory?
Are you required to maintain a minimum
No.
either balance?
No. Good question. Any other questions for Tyler? So with that, would you like to present the claims and purchases for a payment? They were in your packet.
Do you have that, Eddie? Do you
I have it in front of me now.
here?
Okay, so the first one is on page 1 there. That to JP Morgan Chase, that is the existing bonds, not the new bonds that we are paying out of Fund 406. So you've already seeing that. That's not unusual. And then not included on the summary page is Fund 411, the Meyer Plastics deal. I thought that was an EDC, not RDC.
No, that's RDC.
So then I can add that to the summary. But again, that's not a fund that we can go out and use on anything other than the debt service. So we're basically just approving debt service on that one, or we are. Again, on the next page, it's just agent fees tied to the Meyer Plastics deal. And then you actually get to the bulk of the claims here, which is Dan's fee, the HWC engineering design fee,
Related to the Trades District.
and then your ongoing lawn care.
And that lawn care, by the way, was paid in advance by the developer on Franklin, just so we would handle it, and he didn't have to handle it from Georgia. So we've already been paid that money.
Yep.
So with that, I would ask Mr. President Clifford for a motion to approve the.
I'd like to move that we approve the claims as submitted. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor by show of hands? Thank you.
Tyler and Humphrey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to ask on behalf of this commission that we get the detailed forecast summary report that you often put together at least once a quarter. And I'd like to see, for going further, if it's okay with the council or commissioners, I'd like to see a one-page summary of our budget and the other missions
We can do
of our cash position.
Absolutely.
Repeat that last.
I'd like to a one-page summary every month of our cash flows, and then I'd like once a quarter the comprehensive report.
Thank you.
For the quarterly, you wanting the projections out like a few years on the revenue?
I want it like Jason used to prepare it a year or so ago in the report format.
Right on, okay.
Thank you.
Need this back, Joe?
Well, yeah, actually, I do need Click's signature.
Thanks, Tyler.
All right, I'm going to hop around a little bit on this agenda. I'd like to schedule the new member orientation if possible while everybody's here instead of send 30 emails back and forth. My preference would be a Thursday afternoon. I'm thinking of a 2-hour session. Right now, what did we just agree to for that meeting this morning? Was it?
That was the September the 1st, right?
Yes, so August the 25th would be a possibility for me. And by the way, we will not be discussing any action items or anything that would come before this council that wouldn't violate the public open door law. This will just be orientation of our past and where our money comes from and those sort of things. Thursday the 8th, we could do it 1 to 3 before the RDC meeting. But Thursdays are my typical day here. That's why I'm being kind of selfish. So, Mr. McGregor and Mr. Klein, do you have a preference?
Sounds like the 25th will work for both of us.
Yes.
So let's set the 25th, if that's okay. Let's set the 25th from,
For all the rest, I'm not available, but if it's for the new members.
just for the new members, and Cheryl, you've got it all down, so I appreciate that. At the 25th, let's set it from 1:15 to 3 o'clock or so, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll distribute a calendar invite.
Joe, will you send a calendar entry out?
I'll send that out.
And anybody that wants to attend as a council or a commissioner is welcome to. But I think it's mostly things that you'll be aware of. All right. With that done, I'm going to ask Mr. Poehler to step up and give us a report on the Trades District. Engineering, please. So let me give a little background. We will also update you in your orientation session on how we got to where Brian is today and the full extent of the Trades District concepts and the strategic plan. HWC has been hired along with several of their sub-consultants to basically provide a design for the clean out of the big CSX ditch that runs down along the track behind the Trades District that really hadn't been touched for 30 years, to survey the entire area, both in terms of topography, land ownership, parcels, right-of-way, all those sort of things, and then to develop a proposal relative to the needed infrastructure and all those things that are going on. So we'll bring you fully up to speed at the orientation session, but Brian is here once a month to update us on their progress relative to engineering.
Very good.
There you go.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Brian Poehler with HWC Engineering. I usually prepare just a one-page, maybe two-page summary of kind of what we did in the last month, what we anticipate doing on the next month, kind of where we are on the project. We started this, we were put under contract May 12th is when we started, and most of the initial work was gathering background information and getting the survey completed. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff out there, so we've pretty much been doing survey for the last 3 months. And haven't really started into real technical design yet. But our survey should be completed tomorrow, 100%. And it's very difficult to read, but I tried to give you a PDF. I mean, it's in PDF format, but it's a overview of kind of what we've surveyed and where we're looking at. We're also coordinating with a lot of other consultants. A firm by the name of CHA is doing it's a corridor access improvements along Pendleton Pike. So they're going to be beautifying kind of the center of Pendleton Pike. So we're trying to coordinate with them on where we come in and make any access points into the Trades District with a new boulevard or new access points and what that's going to look like. So we've had some meetings with NDOT to discuss this, meetings with CHA. We've also put, as part of our team, is a consultant, sub-consultant called WSP, and they have to do a traffic impact study. So NDOT wants to see what are turning movements, what are anticipated turning movements, and kind of projected it out. It's a little bit of a crystal ball, but it's looking out and seeing what improvements need to be made to those intersections and what type of actual infrastructure needs to go in at those intersections. So we have just started that work. That'll be a few months. Anticipate on doing that. As we're doing that, we're going to be starting to lay out the realignment of kind of Record Street as I go through, and then that Central Boulevard that will now connect into Pendleton Pike. And we anticipate that not being signalized. NDOT has expressed they want it more left in and left out to control traffic there, but we're kind of working through what that will look like when it's finally done. With that said, we're also, as Dan mentioned, we're putting work together to clean out the ditch along the CSX railroad. So We've started to lay that out into CAD work and design, and started to do drainage analysis to see what that needs to, what size it needs to be and how much work needs to be done. We anticipate that to kind of be the first project, and hopefully we'll have that put together before the end of the year so we can get that out to bid. It's kind of what we're anticipating. Some other things I think you can kind of see in the one map I gave you, we're anticipating a roundabout somewhere in the center, kind of to that center boulevard, and kind of making it a gateway into the trades district. That's, I believe that's pretty much.
So the critical question that Sri asked, you believe we'll be having bidding documents in hand for that ditch work by the end of the year?
I hope so. Our PM that's in charge of the drainage work is out this week, so I don't have a schedule from him, but I know we're well on our way to that.
Okay. Any questions for Brian?
And so no surprises so far with your existing survey that would delay the project?
We found some additional stuff along the ditch, but I don't know about surprises. I mean, we can work through it all.
Thank you.
No bodies yet.
Brian, just
No one's told me of anybody.
a curiosity question. What are the fine black lines?
So that's kind of like the limits of where they surveyed, I believe.
Okay.
So it's kind of.
So that's property limits?
I don't believe they're property limits, but just kind of extensive where we surveyed. We didn't survey the whole thing.
Okay.
We stopped in areas. I believe that's what they are.
We didn't see a reason, Jerry, to survey the entire
Okay,
parcel.
no, that's fine. Just wondered just curiosity. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is. I didn't study it as much as I should have.
So Brian, the central roundabout, thank you, Joe. Show me, where's that going to be?
Yeah. So we think that Central Boulevard, if I can come.
Central Boulevard.
Yeah, which is kind of what we're calling, will be somewhere in this area.
Oh, okay, so you were right, Joe.
There are
Yeah.
buildings there.
Right,
Buildings maybe. It's hard to see on that compared to this.
Good.
And hopefully by next meeting, I can have something to you that will kind of lay it out on this graphic to say
Great.
what it is. But we're anticipating somewhere around that location.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm going to knock off a few quick items here because we have some longer presentations coming up. I have some great news in that we were able to secure the dedication of the right-of-way for the parking spaces, if you'll remember, that were owed Mills as part of the Frigi project. We were able to get DMD to agree that that was already in the right-of-way of the new Plummer Street, and it was actually dedicated to Frigi by mistake to Mike Webster, and he's agreed to sign off on it. Those deeds are being prepared right now, and I would suspect by the time we meet next month, that issue's 100% to bed.
Congratulations.
So we didn't end up with near the cost there that we expected to. 10160 East 56th Street, that's the parcel that you know I've been working on for about 2 years to break away out of the old 56th Street right-of-way. We should have the appraisals in your hands by next month to be able to issue a public offering. They've been ordered. I expect to have them by next month. Probably the biggest news that should make Commissioner Sullivan happy is that Racetrack has secured their demo permits. I believe the city has approved the license of their demo contractor. They intend to start demo in the next week or two, and they're not going to stop. They're going to move right on to new construction. And they expect to have the project occupied at either the end of the second quarter or the beginning of the third quarter of 2023. In addition, rather than rely on their contractor to put a coming soon sign, they've gone directly to a sign vendor and asked them to produce a coming soon sign that they expect to have up in the next couple of weeks with a full rendering. So I believe that handles the concerns of this commission relative to the Racetrack project, and I had that report directly from Mr. Bell yesterday. Any further questions regarding that?
Thank you.
I wanted to point out to the group that the FHRA Parcel J East that we have available now, it's not really under our purview, but I wanted to make you aware that the city and the FHRA are going to go out for requests for proposals for those properties, for that property. That's the one that was going to be the Sandy project and Veritas project. That's now off the table. So I have set a price on that parcel on behalf of the FHRA of $1.5 million, but we should be seeing what's proposed in that relatively soon. Okay, next I would like to invite Mr. Khan, Mr. Irfan Khan, to the microphone. And anybody you want to bring with you? So I want to bring the commission, remind the commission that approximately 2 years ago, before COVID, which is the way we measure everything, Mr. Khan purchased a site of 8024 East 46th Street.
8026.
8026 East 8026 East 46th Street. Thank you. His idea at the time was to put some form of Pakistani or Himalayan salts business in that. They presented us a building model that we approved. Since then, his business plan has changed. They've had some personal problems. This is the situation I explained to the commission last month, where he asked if he could get out of the restrictive covenant that we placed on it, that if development didn't occur within 2 years, that we had the right to buy it back at 30% less than what he paid for the parcel. We put that covenant on that property because we wanted to be sure that redevelopment did occur. It's my understanding from communications with Mr. Khan that the parties he have with him wish to buy that property and commit to a development. So with that, we're going to hear what they have to say and let you all make a decision. I do have a recommendation, I believe. Joe, did you check the zoning? Would it allow storage?
Yes, it does allow the storage that we talked about, yeah.
All right. So with that,
My name is Irfan Khan. I bought the lot to build it and to do my business, but due to COVID, and it was adjacent to my lot, my previous lot, so I wanted the whole thing, and I requested the city, and then I purchased it for my business to do, but due to COVID and due to some health issue with my wife, I cannot continue to build that or to move forward. But then I have a buyer who can go on with the same plan and develop that and put it on tax roll, which we discuss, and we put everything, on written, and they have the written, if you wanted to see that, they wanted to build something nice there, to uplift the neighborhood and put it back on tax roll. So it's just a request if you guys can approve that. But
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
so Mr. Gonzalez, if you'd like to step up and speak to the commission, tell them what you want to do. And
what they wanted to do, they wanted to build the same, almost kind of like the same storage facility, which they wanted to use it for the construction business. And they would, create more jobs and, try to put it back on the tax roll. So, to do business, they would like to buy that parcel in order to build on it.
so to remind the commission, we basically proved this exact same presentation 2 years ago, with the exception that I believe we said that it was subject to approval by the Plan Commission relative to landscape profile and required anything that might be required in terms of the front. I think our thought was that there might be some landscaping required, surely desirable, maybe a little masonry and some windows in the front. I pretty much believe that's how that discussion went. And then we approved it subject to those things and subject to the restriction that development did occur. I will remind you that lot, as Mr. Khan has experienced, while it's been vacant, and he spent a considerable time in Pakistan the last couple of years. Was it Pakistan, am I right?
Yes, sir. Due to COVID, I couldn't come.
Back and forth, right?
Yes. So
while he was gone, there were at least 2 occasions where people parked empty semi-vans there, cars there, trash there. So the reason we want that lots developed is to take care of that problem as well as some capital improvement. It's obvious this won't create much capital improvement with that style of building. I'm a little bit concerned of what it might look like from the street, although I will tell you it's pretty rough on down that street as it is right now. And the building next to it, it was the building that you all approved for Eric McDowell and his computer repair business. So I think my recommendation to you, and then you all do whatever you wish, my recommendation is that we approve this, again, subject to the planning and zoning ordinance of the city, and I would encourage you, before you complete your purchase, Mr. Gonzalez, to maybe check with Renee Rafala as to what might be required relative to landscaping or the finish out of that building, just to be sure you know what's going on.
That parcel is zoned I-2, just so you know.
With I-2, it's probably fine.
I-2.
But you should double check that.
I have the paperwork.
Okay, as long as you've double checked it.
Yeah, he's got it.
And then my only request is that I believe that we should release the option or release the deed restriction that Mr. Kahn has, but the new owner needs to, through Mr. Sturwell, our attorney, needs to sign an option that the city's same clause for buying it back at 30% less than Mr. Irfan paid exists, and we'll extend that 2 years, which would totally go away once construction occurs, but we want to see that lot developed. So we would ask that the same restriction apply to the new owners that you took as part of closing.
Yes, we've talked to him, and they are agreed to it, and we also put it in our closing, the documentation, and they're taking care of that. So they would be building it during that time.
Okay, so as long as the Redevelopment Commission is protected that something does get done on that lot, I think this is a far improvement over what exists there now. So that's my recommendation to the commission. Ask your questions, do what you want.
I do have just one question. So you're saying that we're going to form, based on what you just said, or develop a new restrictive covenant?
I'll let Adam explain how it would work.
That'd be great. It's a legal document.
Yes.
Okay.
So when do you guys plan to close?
When are we
End
closing?
of this month.
Okay. What we'll need is an option agreement that we'll record it'll be very simple. It'll have, this commission will have the right to purchase the property back for a specified price, which will be, I think, 70% of what initially paid for it, for a 2-year period but as long as the construction and everything is started, then that option goes away. It'll need to be between the commission and the new buyer. It'll be basically it's like any other regular option agreement, only it's, we don't want to buy it, we want them to develop it, but it'll be a one-page option agreement that you guys will need to sign and approve.
So you're going to develop that?
Adam will be developing.
You're Adam.
I'll draft it.
You'll draft it?
And then I'll make sure to collect your signatures, yeah.
Okay. As long as that happens, I'm for it.
And I would like a commitment on part of the buyer to put a very nice sign that says what construction company it is, who's there, dress the building up a little bit in the front.
Any other comments, questions from the commission?
So the 2 year, originally the 2 years would have ended when?
It's already,
November of this year, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
but we're going to start a new 2 years from now.
It would start by the end of August, consistent with the purchase?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we're basically saying that construction has to occur before the end of August of 2024.
You used the word begin construction.
It was his word, not
I
mine.
feel more comfortable that ending construction, just so we're not continuing to.
I agree. Construction should be completed by August of '24.
Correct.
I agree. Comments in there, but
We have other questions.
What type of construction business is it that you'd be operating there?
yeah. So let me back up. Adam's pointing out a point that I agree with. It'd be really hard to backtrack if they have half their investment and half the building up. The original agreement called for commence within 2 years. I think that is more consistent with the ability to enforce it. I don't know how you claw back with half of it done.
Yeah, my concern is just what is beginning construction? I mean, are we going to be here another 2 years and we're having the same conversation with somebody else?
Commences, completed and plans have been submitted to the right authorities, and basically shovels have been put into the ground, and it is somewhat started.
So,
I mean, it's not where that exactly that thin line exists is, you know, up for debate, but it would be hard, right, if they built 90% of it to come back and try to take it back for a smaller price. There's no perfect solution, but this at least allows, if nothing is occurring, us to come back and reacquire the property.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I'm just, what type of construction and what type of equipment would be coming in and out of the site?
it would be basically most of the residential and commercial construction that they're doing, because they have the certification and bonded and licensed. They do have their certification, and you can see that on the board. So they would be just putting most of the equipment, like residential and commercial.
Residential, light commercial?
Yeah.
Or is it painting?
Tools and the equipment, they store a secure place. Right now, they are paying rent at a different facility. They want to get rid of that one and make their own. It is also convenient for their business to access different sites they work at. And instead of going from here, storing these things, gas trip, every time they have to do nothing, go back, store the things, come back again, live here. But they is a rental place. And will treat them with all the things close to their home.
So we're talking, I think what Commissioner Klein, pardon me for butting in, but I think he's asking, is this bulldozers and heavy-duty equipment, or is this scaffolding and hand tools and lumber, and what do you anticipate will actually be stored in the facility?
Yeah.
Basically, it's not real heavy-duty stuff, but it's tools. I got a couple bins, construction bins. I need it safe in the storage, like compressors, air guns, extension ladders, kind of stuff, short stuff, a little bit of equipment, but a couple trailers, concrete forms, but small one. It's nothing bigger like a big truck, it's like a semis or something like that. It's nothing real big. It's
Okay.
medium.
All right. Mostly traffic would be between 6 a.m. and dark during the summer, probably, as you're coming in and out?
Couple little box trucks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I would appreciate a motion to approve the release of the con commitment, the drafting of the new commitment to allow the property transfer to occur from Mr. Khan to Mr. Gonzalez and Ms. Gill.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Show of hands for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it's good. We need to work through Mr. Sturwald. He can give you a business card or whatever to be sure that we handle everything, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
The city right now is getting a tremendous amount of interest in the EV world. As you know, NDOT and the federal government are interested in having EV charging stations along the interstate corridors. Over the last month, with the help of Councilor Ruzimaroff and myself attending various NDOT seminars, several meetings we've had, we've tried to start positioning the city to be one of the vending sites or the charging sites, if you will, to support 465, which has to be within a mile. We were approached a week or so ago with a meeting with the mayor with a group from Tesco. that has demonstrated some real expertise in that area, that is also working with Marion County and others to advance the same cause. They have an interesting proposition for you today. I've asked them to come speak to you. I think it's a perfect project for this RDC and should be of interest to us. This is Mark, by the way. Introduce your team.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Zerner. And how do I get the...
Joe can help you pull that up.
Thanks, Joe.
I would. I've got it loaded, Joe. You just got to get them to the flash drive.
Yes, sir. No problem.
You can just back and forth, just like
Back and forth here.
Appreciate it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'll get packet situated. Well, good afternoon, commissioners and ladies and gentlemen. We are Tesco, and we are thrilled to be here this afternoon. We thank both the mayor and Mr. Zerner and the team here in Lawrence for giving us this opportunity to be before you today. All right, there we go. Our team, Tesco, this is our president, who is also my wife, so she gets to sign the paycheck, and I'm on my toes, but Chris has been in the construction industry in the world from the time she was a little girl. Family businesses, you might know it as Bowen Engineering, large civil site public works contractor across the country, and she is now serving as our president of both two companies that we have branded as Tesco. One is Total Energy Solutions Company, and then the other is Total Engineering. Also, as you see, I'm the executive vice president of sales. I bring 20 years of construction experience. And then our Vice President of Engineering Services, Don Humphrey, who has been with us since 2014. He's out on site at another meeting today, couldn't be with us. But then Jim Barber, who just joined our team to head up our EV operations. Jim comes with a background with both General Electric, General Motors, and also Siemens, and has spent the last several years until he joined us about 6 months ago, working at a local electrical contractor here. He's worked in procurement, leadership, and in purchasing there. So he brings a wide range of expertise as it relates to the energy field, but also exploration. Jim, for a matter of fact, back in the mid-90s when he was working at GM, in the early days as GM was developing electrification as it relates to automobiles. So Jim brings that level of expertise, and we're pleased to have him here on the team. So I'll let the folks sit down, and I'll go through our presentation. A little bit about Tesco. We are a women business enterprise, fully certified by both the City of Indianapolis, the State of Indiana, and our national certifications through the WBENC. As I mentioned, Chris started Total Energy Solutions in 2004 as an energy efficiency company. So looking at different programs that focused on green at that time, you can imagine it wasn't surely the time at that time with as much emphasis as we have right now on those things related to the environment and related to green. In 2008, that's when actually we met. We began a mentor-protege program at Maxim Crane Works. Maxim is the largest national crane rental company in the United States. And at that time was when the first stimulus package came out with infrastructure in the nation. We realized that we needed a partner to focus on helping us become more diverse as a company. Chris raised her hand and said, "I'll learn about cranes." And she'd been around them most of her life through the family business. So we worked there and got national certs and began working together in partnership with Maxim Crane Works. 2012, we expanded then into supply chain and process equipment and working there to provide viable relationships through some of the partners that I'll show you here in a minute. And then in 2014, we jumped full steam in. I came over from Maxim, and the last 8 years now, we've been growing the business exponentially every year. And then 2022. So this gives you a feel for our current divisions where we are in supply chain, our civil engineering, and now our new division in EV chargers where we are focusing on planning, assessment, distribution, and integration and maintenance and service. These are just a snapshot of some of our current, existing, and past clients, and you will see many of these names that you know. We do quite a bit of work with Citizens Energy, extensive work with AEP, which is a regional Midwest power company, AES, IPL, and most of these big contractors that you see, the major general contractors and major subcontractors throughout the Midwest. Our partners, again, you will see that from the large equipment companies, McAllister, United, Maxim in the crane business, and then some of the specialized process equipment partners, and then at the bottom, our newest partners in our turn-on green, Zeph and Siemens. So today we're here to talk about the potential of working together with the City of Lawrence and the RDC in helping you look at the future. Look at this new frontier as it relates to EV and EV charging, and how can, in a pragmatic way, you take steps, the effective steps, to plan accordingly for something that many of us, let's face it, we don't really know what it looks like, other than Ford and GM and all the major automakers are saying in 3 years, you want a new car, it's going to have to be electric. And so with that change of tide, and as things move forward, we recognized about 6 months ago, we sat down. We've been friends with Jim a long time. Jim and Chris and Jim's wife are all master swimmers, so they all swim together. And so we said, hey, how about us diving into another pool of water and trying something unique and different? So it really started as friends, and what we recognized at that time, we were, you're hearing everything about what's happening in the federal infrastructure legislation that just came down. It's about $6.5 billion that's already been earmarked, and in this recent package, there's even more, because now purchasing incentives have been brought back in. I think, what is it, a 10-year run that they've expanded the incentives on purchasing electric vehicles. So the federal legislation is really a wake-up call. We were fortunate enough to work with the state of Indiana when they issued an RFI to put the state plan together. We helped respond to that, be a part of that. And now the state plan has been presented. Now the Federal Department of Transportation is looking at the Indiana plan. But primarily, the biggest steps on, as Dan mentioned, on the state plan is the connection of electric charging stations every 50 miles on interstate highways. Not just across Indiana, but across the country. That's the first priority. So in looking at that, we've been, kicking things around, saying, how can we best get into this? Because Jim's done a deep dive. We've been to national conferences. We've really invested a tremendous amount as a company, recognizing that from our perspective, we want to come alongside Hoosiers, we want to come alongside cities and towns, and corporate needs, institutional needs. And so we've begun really talking with a number of folks. We've met with about 6 cities. We'll be meeting next week with leadership at Purdue that handles their entire mobilization plan. We have a meeting in 2 weeks with CEG. We've already had meetings with citizens to help them look at fleet and also then look at charging. And so based on really the relationships that we've been able to make on the construction side, it's been a natural step for us to look and say, hey, we can bring this level of expertise by, boning up on what's going on with this new frontier of EV. Our approach is what we've carved out. We've been at it 6 months, but I think one of the things we learned is that, okay, we have these relationships with Siemens, with Zeph, with Turn On Green. They're all different and unique type of charging company that provide the hardware for charging. But what we've learned more than anything, there's charging that's happening out there. You can talk to the electrical contractors. We've met with ERMCO. We've met with First Electric, the folks that are now being called because folks say, I need chargers. But really, to answer the tough questions about future needs, folks say, well, I've got folks, and maybe we need 2, maybe we need 4, maybe we need 6 superchargers. Well, that'll only cost you about $1 million. So understanding the landscape is critical. And we realized early on that both from understanding the funding, understanding the federal legislation, working with the state of Indiana. HNTB, which is a large national engineering firm, was hired by the state to put the state plan together. We've met with leadership from HNTB to just say we can be a resource. Certainly one of the things that's unique about us, being a women business enterprise, the federal legislation requires diverse spend. It also requires minority participation and disadvantaged neighborhoods as well. So they've covered the landscape very nicely. So we came back, realized the first thing we need to do is help folks understand. So we have created, and you'll see on the back of your presentation package, what we call our VOLT assessment tool. And it's really 7 steps that will help organizations, businesses, communities work through and understand how do we get from point A to point B. How do we get this thing started? And so that's been our, really, I think, the epiphany that we've had several weeks ago by recognizing we need to help folks move along the path in an effective way. So once we do the assessment, then we can help you with a roadmap for charging integration. What is integration? Integration is looking at the type of, the amount of electricity you need to be able to tap into these chargers, where the chargers go, what are the trends for the future, so that, again, in most cases, what we'll say, and what Jim does, and he'll bring it up, that maybe at the first location, there's just 2 pedestals with 4 chargers that are level 2. Those are the mid-level chargers. But you want to rough in that at some point in time, probably certainly in 2 or 3 years, that location may have a dozen, that you may have access to be able to bring superchargers in. But in most cases, we want to help understand what the future needs will look like. And so that comes back with analytics. It comes back, we have a national organization that can get us that information. And then looking at creating the roadmap for integration, and that is then working. We aren't physically going to install. We'll work with, if the city came back and said, we've got this longstanding partnership with an electrical contracting firm, that's who you hire. But in this case, we want to be, as I call it, the easy button to help you understand what you need, the type of equipment, and then more importantly on the back end, how do you get paid for it? How do we track it? And so that's another thing that these folks, whether it's Siemens, whether it's Zeph or Turn On Green, they all have the software, the back end that will help you track it and create an economic model that will, today, most cases, Chris and I are both Tesla drivers, so Mr. Musk has done a good job figuring out how to make money. And so there's a system in a way that, you put your credit card down monthly and you go to a Tesla charger. And, as I tell my friends they call them the ICE engines, the internal combustion engine, I've got a nice little app that say, well, here's how much I'm up on you this month in terms of savings from electric versus gas. And, of course, you can look at that's one thing. All right, in these days where gas prices are through the ceiling, good for me. But more importantly, it's really social responsibility. It's looking at saying, this is the environment. This is a piece of that. Where does this go? We don't know. But one thing we know in terms of fleet, Amazon's looking at their last mile program where they will be totally electric. On that side, we know that at airports, and we just saw an article that came up at Burns Harbor that they are entering into a pilot program right now for several of their tow vehicles that are there at the port to become electric vehicles. So the range of school buses, right? That's one that right now we know that based on usage, it's a very effective model because, again, buses sit for a while. We drive them in the morning, we drive them in the afternoon, they're charged up and ready to go. So we're talking with our partners, Siemens, Zeph. Zeph is working more with rural communities, with REMCs, and then our Turn On Green partnership is one that these folks are really a startup, and we were able to get a rep relationship with them. So here is the opportunity that we would like to present to you today. We have had conversations with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Planning Organization, several meetings with Anna there, and again, from her perspective, as she says, all this infrastructure money that's coming down and what the MPO has a relationship with, she says, it's kind of like I'm drinking water from a fire hose. And so my good friend, Rob Barnes from Hagerman, who couldn't be with us today. Rob has a long-standing relationship with Anna and the MPO, introduced us and said, let's start talking about opportunities. Our initial plan was we have this concept called Easy EV, and we would have these charging depots that would be in the grid along the interstate highway. So we have a plan for that. So it just so happens that Mr. Zerner pointed out a piece of property that could have great potential in the future. That we could probably establish something like this in that capacity. But before we get the cart before the horse, Anna said, let's identify 3 communities where we can establish plans. And she has grant dollars that are available. There's a deadline of September 1st. Each one of those grants could be up to $75,000 with a 20% local match. and would allow us to get moving and come back and do a comprehensive plan over the next several months to identify the appropriate steps, not only for a supercharger station, but for other places that the mayor has mentioned, some ideas in the community where charging stations could go. So our proposal would be that we could work with the RDC to help you plan and write a grant for IMPO consideration. I think we will be looked on favorably. No guarantees, but having met last Friday, we met with Anna. She's excited, and she's gung-ho about the opportunities, the timing that we have with the city of Lawrence. And then naturally, if we get the grant, we'd love to do the work, but that's for another time. So I would entertain any questions right now, and thank you for your attention.
So I'd just like to reiterate, thank you, Mark, for that, and thank you to your whole group for being here, Chris, Jim. 3 or 4 things come to mind. One is that Tesco has asked the city for an opportunity to just prove that they have the connections and the ability to do what they say they can do with no obligation to securing their services going forward. They want to demonstrate that they have the capacity and earn our respect. 2 is, it's my understanding that the MPO is actually interested in identifying these 3 locations for the primary electrical vehicle charging stations to be established as the first part of their network, and sitting on Pendleton Pike being the main gateway to the west, or the east, I'm sorry. And in line with what we're trying to do with the Trades District and Pendleton Pike upgrades and all the many things we have going on here and the fort, we think there's 3 or 4 potential places where that could be really valuable to the city. And so basically what we're asking today is Tesco and Jim and Chris and Mark are volunteering to put the application together for us for the $75,000 planning grant with the MPO to validate where those systems may be and what they might look like and how they might best fit in the interest of the MPO and the state and the federal plan, and give Lawrence a chance to move to the front line with NDOT and others in electrical vehicle charging. They're offering to do that basically for free with their expertise, with our only commitment that is if they're able to secure that grant, we'd have a $15,000 commitment as part of that match. To me, with all the things that we're trying to do futuristic and be green, to have that step and to have them pitch in with us with their expertise, and particularly Jim's impressed me. He's got a whole history in this. I think it would be a good thing for this commission to allow and authorize Tesco to submit this grant on our behalf. So that's why I have them here. I think that it fulfills the mission and the vision we've been talking about to try to be more green and sustainable. And to have that grant and catch the attention of the MPO in the state of Indiana, I think could really be helpful to us. So, one other thing I do want to point out that I think he made fairly clear, but Chris is an MBE, and we've tried to, over the last 2 years, be more and more reflective of supporting those types of organizations. So those are my comments. Welcome the commissioners' questions and feedback.
My only comment would be that we know that's the way the world is going, so makes great sense.
Cheryl, you always have good perspective.
To whom do you submit the grant? Is that the city of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana, or
It would actually,
federal
it is
government?
actually MPO funds. So collectively, we'd work on your behalf. The RDC puts the application in, and then Anna and the folks at the MPO actually have the funds. So they've got a pot of funds to use that they actually by September.
It's the MPO who reviews.
Yeah, MPO. Yes, ma'am.
And then second, is the 15,000 match come from the city of Indianapolis budget?
It's going to come from the RDC budget.
From us.
The grant is basically just an assessment and valuation.
Mark, would you anticipate submitting for the full $75,000?
That's a good question. I think, we can go up to 75. As we look at, and you think about the assessment, we'll lead that effort, but as we've talked, we'll have conversations. We need to get a local flavor as well because part of this is going to be an encompassing of the entire community. So as we look at, we're going to need to engage community conversation, not only business, but your school system as well. I think they clearly will be someone that we want to bring in and have conversation with as well, just because whether it's buses, whether it's students, whether it's teachers, there's going to be, you got a lot of cars that I believe at least one of your schools is in the town, right? So several, obviously, elementary schools. So in that case, I think we want to have that level of consideration as well. Just engage as many as possible so no one comes back and says, well, I never heard about it. You know, they're moving forward with this, and did we have a, you know, we want to engage as much conversation so that when the decision is made by the community, this is how you move forward, it's got that stamp of approval from the community and from business leaders and civic folks as well. So that's, you know, I spent a number of years working in state and city government, led a number of different public-private partnerships, and understand the critical importance of making sure that if you voted yes today, we want to do the work. We understand who we're working for, and we'll do it correctly and make sure that the city of Lawrence is duly respected in a positive way. But on the end of the day, we get a good, solid product. So back to your question, I don't know yet. I think we know that we can go up to that. I think Anna's made it very clear that.
I don't know why we wouldn't submit for the full amount with all that we have to study. The other thing that comes to my mind is I need a commissioner or two volunteer to be there to look over their shoulder and agree with what they want to do and to participate and come back to this group. They need somebody to work with that's really excited about participating in this project. And I think we need a commissioner contact for them to kind of be on that application committee, or at least one, if not two. Mr. Clifford, I would make that a comment.
Mark, have you done one of these before? Have you done a study like this before?
You will be the first.
Okay.
Do you
know anyone else who has done a study like this before?
Everyone I talk to. I mean, we're out in front.
Has the NPO evaluated a grant submission before?
Nope, this will be the first one. I mean, they look at grant apps all the time, but as it relates to this, this will be the first. We are painting a moving bus. This is for this process. As I talk to folks across the state, everybody says, you know, man, you guys, this is what we all need. But to answer the questions, you have to go through the process. So the city of Lawrence will be number one.
So who would actually do the study?
We'll lead it. We have our team. Jim will be a part of it. Our Director of Engineering Services, Don Humphrey. We have a very skilled grant writer, researcher, business development consultant that we've done a number of work with, a number of projects with. Linda Sparks is part of our team.
So you've got a product that you could show us? Here's what we'd produce as far as the outcome.
I think there's two different questions here. I'm not sure that we're talking on the same plane. I think Jerry's question is that if we're successful in getting the grant,
yes,
will you do the study?
The application is the first part. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm assuming you've kind of got that wired.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the impression I get from your presentation. What I'm concerned with is what happens next. I've been involved with some of these studies before myself. And I mean, what makes me nervous about this a little bit is that you've not done any of this before.
Well, and as it relates to EV, I don't believe you'll find anyone in Indiana that will be able to say they've done a study.
Okay.
So
that's what I'm looking for.
What we've done is we've assembled a team that brings expertise. We have taken a deep dive into both the technology, and as we work through this, we are all in this thing together. And so, as it relates to studies and as it relates to projects and those things, I've been involved my entire professional career in going after grants and working with public-private partnerships. So I'm comfortable with this type of approach.
So if you secure the grant, then would it be your objective to submit a proposal to the city to use those grants funds and lead that study on the city's behalf? Is that what you're thinking?
We would welcome that, and we would appreciate it, but there's no guarantee. I think what we recognize, the city's going to have to make the decision, but we want to help. We want to help right now. Go after it.
Sure, we're clear. You're offering to help us submit for the grant.
Yes, sir.
And then if we're successful, you're willing to be one of, if we go out for proposals to lead that study, you're willing to be one of two or three or so that might decide to submit to that proposal to lead this, to actually perform the study?
Yes, sir.
Does that help the commissioners to understand what we're speaking to?
I have a question about it, though. Getting the grant, does that guarantee then that we are be part of the state-funded whatever to have a charging station?
No.
It's just that we're getting it to assess and then repropose back.
I think without this study, it's going to be hard to command the respect of the MPO or the state that we have the facilities, the capacity, and the need. That's why we need the study.
Your drop dead date on the grant submission is September 1st?
That's right.
Okay.
And then when did,
To mention one thing, so the federal funding, you can't apply for projects until October 1st. But once October 1st hits, as soon as you can apply, then the MPO will be managing those funds, the distribution as well. So that would be great to be getting ready for that as well.
So Anna and the MPO will have access. There's three from the federal infrastructure: states, cities and towns, and the MPOs. They're the ones that can go after the federal grants for this work. So there's two buckets. You've got a bucket over here that's going to go along with the interstates, and then there will be competitive grants that cities and towns will be able to do. There's other funds that are set aside for college in universities. There's others that's set aside for rural communities. So they've really looked at all the paths and avenues for funding sources.
When you say who's doing that? Who's
doing-
looking at that path and doing these set-asides? And is that in a bill?
Well, it was all part of the federal infrastructure, this recent bill. Okay. So there's $6.5 billion.
That they just worked on?
This bill, there's some add-ons. It was the original infrastructure bill that was passed, the bipartisan bill, several months ago.
Right.
Yeah, it's in there. So the dollars set aside for the electrification of interstate highways are already committed. And the rest of it, if I understand, they'll all be competitive grants. So cities, towns, MPOs, and states can apply for those competitive grants. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you we may be the first folks in, because when you talk to the MPO, they hadn't even looked at it until Rob and I showed up a month ago. So we have an opportunity to get out in front, and we very much would like to work with you. We live nearby not in the city, but we're on Sargent Road, so we're just around the corner. And, I understand, Mr. Clifford, your concerns. I recognize that. But, if someone doesn't take the first step, you'll never have the first step. And so that's where we're at. I appreciate Mr. Zerner bringing us here today, and we'll do everything we can to earn the respect and trust to hopefully have the opportunity to do the work in the months after this grant hopefully is approved.
Chris, the timeline that you were talking about, the submission is by September 1st, and then do you expect the review before October 1st then?
Well, October 1st would be applying for the federal funds.
Right.
And that's if you have a plan and have a project. So September 1st is just to get the grant that will cover the assessment, or up to these.
Okay. But do you know when that grant would be reviewed? Okay.
The MPO? I think it's a pretty quick process. I think the MPO controls those dollars, and they have them available. And I mean, I honestly, I wouldn't be wasting your time today if I didn't feel like that, she sent us in a direction. She's already made overtures to 2 other communities to say, I want to introduce you to Tesco. I think we've earned the respect and the confidence of the MPO. And to that end, that hopefully gives you a level of confidence to know that if the IMPO is supportive, if Siemens says you guys are good enough to work with, and a few of these other folks, that we're doing what we believe professionally to do to bring the very, very best to our partners.
So we know when there's new technologies, there's always what we call early adopters who really go out to learn, tweak, relearn, tweak. So my question is, so we are assessing what for Lawrence? There's charging stations across the United States already. There's a lot of work already being done in this electrification landscape. What is it that you bring into the Lawrence town to our community? What is the end product? I can't get my heads around, when you're done with the assessment, Lawrence, you'll be able to do this in this new space. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest question is power. I think, you drive by, you take a look at you look at a little charger, all right, a little drip, level 1. You plug your car into that, you sit for an hour and you'll get 10 miles. Some people feel like, well, I did my civic responsibility and I've got a charging station in. Ultimately, is going to be looking at both power needs, appropriate equipment in terms of what type of apparatus, where do these go to best serve the community? What are we doing in terms of the whole process of the economic enterprise that's involved, work on that back end to help understand how the city can make money, get reimbursed, tracking of usage. I mean, the biggest challenges as things come down the pike really are going to be the public utilities. The further along you get into this, that, again, part of the concern all comes back to say, is the grid going to be able, the naysayers on one side say, can the grid support it? Well, in the here and the now today, you're right. Technology will always increase. That's why you want to have expertise with you. I mean, right now, the automobile manufacturers, in terms of batteries, they're looking at new materials because we realize that the precious materials that go into the batteries, charge these cars, are difficult to find. So to that end, we look at that we can handle the entire operation and first of all, come back, go through this assessment process, recognize that the best decisions are made, that there's enough buy-in, that there's community engagement involved with that, and bring the level of expertise that when you come back and the mayor says, this is what we're going to do, that you've got folks, because someone would say, you're right. Who? How? How'd you do that? I mean, way too many times decisions are made behind doors and folks come out, in particular as this is new technology. There are many, many unknowns, and that's why, again, hearing your concerns, that's why we're here. We're here because, again, the communities need someone that can come along to say, we're making a commitment in a pragmatic way.
So in the recent NDOT seminars we've been participating in, this will go partly to your question, Commissioner McGregor, NDOT has a series of these that they're going to select as sites to support the internet network, and with that comes 80-20 money to buy and equip the sites. That's buying the real estate, putting the chargers in, but without an assessment and the ability to say that it's warranted, I don't know how we'll ever command the attention of NDOT over Fishers or Westfield or some other community. And in my view, this is the first step towards validating that Lawrence is a place to do business and can provide this. That's what we really get out of it, in my opinion.
Good.
If that helps.
It helps.
Jim.
It helped him, but it's not helping me.
Well, let
me review this. So we apply for the grant, okay? And then we complete an assessment, but we don't know what the structure of the assessment's going to be.
Where I disagree with you on that is, in my opinion, the first step is to get the money appropriated. Once the money is appropriated, then I think this commission will issue an RFP and put it on the street that this group and others will respond to, and ask them what they're going to deliver for the money we're going to get and how's it going to help the community.
Okay, that's new news. Good. And then when we get a response to the RFP, then we'll define.
We'll have a scope. We'll have a scope of the project.
Okay, so then and then we take that scope of the projects to NDOT.
Well,
see if we can get a grant.
No, it goes to, what happens is, then that can go to the MPO and to determine whether they can will select us as to one of these 3 sites around Marion County. And then we'll also discover the financing and other sources that are available. I'm just telling you that the NDOT program on its own, which has nothing to do with this at the moment, they're telling us that there's 80-20 money available for there. But if we take the site that I have in mind and we're able to tie that to NDOT, and it comes out of this study as one of the preferred sites to do all this kind of work, I think there's a lot of different symbiosis that comes from this effort. And I think this is the first effort and a big step of what we need to do. Jim, you're the expert on this. Let's hear from the expert instead of the BD guy.
Yeah, so when I joined up with Tesco back earlier this year, Chris and Mark had sent me on a road trip to several different conferences, one being the Vans Clean Transportation in LA, then out to infrastructure back to LA, and then up to Portland for the 4th meeting up there. And these communities being West Coast and Florida and New York, Indiana has been very lacking in the push for the EV market to move forward. Because when you compare what Indiana has to these communities I just mentioned, New York for one, Portland being another, LA being another. They have not only federal incentives, they got state incentives, they got local incentives to push this market forward. And Indiana really doesn't have any incentives for the consumers to buy electric vehicles. Now, with the Inflation Recovery Act that's going to be hitting at the end of this year, we'll start seeing more incentives to push this market forward. But one of the things I've seen as I've been making my travels across the United States and meeting with manufacturers and other clean city initiatives, what they've done, I've seen the studies that are out being produced. And I think Lawrence is being very, very forth moving in developing this study to produce something that would create a point for Lawrence to move to. So when I talk about Portland, I talk about Santa Barbara, I talk about Austin, Texas, I talk about Minneapolis, Minnesota. All these communities have moved forward very aggressively in adopting the EV solutions and putting these studies so that when you do an overlay map of the demographics, traffic patterns of what can be the best placed EV market stations for everybody to economically and qualify equality in terms of allowing someone to buy a $30,000 EV or to buy a $100,000 Tesla. That's really the initiative of what we're trying to understand, is that we're not going to put car charging stations in for those who can afford, the $100,000 E150. We're out there to help provide assistance for all those people that can afford EV, in the next year when the EV markets go down to $30,000. So for Indiana, we're very far behind the rest of the country, and hopefully we can move forward with it on a faster scale with this money coming forward. Thank you.
Hey, excuse me. Do you have a copy of one of those studies?
Yeah.
From one of those cities?
It's a very detailed one, more than probably what.
I'd love to see how they doing that.
There's when.
Now, if you were saying California,
yeah.
That's a different world. It really is. That's why Tesla's. The whole structure, EV structure out there, they've got a network already.
Yeah, one of the things I did when I came on board with Tesco was to seek out charging relationships with the charging manufacturers. Today we have 3. We have another one hopefully next week. But a lot of these charging manufacturers, being Siemens, where I came from, they are a part of that study. So we would enlist them to help provide the study in terms of what we would do. But also there's a lot of independent companies that we would basically probably bring to the party and say we need more overlay maps of identifying the locations that would best serve the community. So yeah, if I can get you.
So you've got a study that you could use as a template, so to speak.
I wouldn't.
Kinds of things that you're, okay.
It's a very, very comprehensive. It's more than what we would probably do. That study probably cost $500,000.
Yeah, but you're going to be able to pick and choose what you'd need for.
Right, yeah.
Because now, would your study include, as far as I know, Lawrence doesn't have an EV plan, the city of Lawrence, or their own vehicles, do they?
So the Deputy Mayor Hoffman, would you address a little bit on site as what you're talking about in terms of electric vehicles for public safety?
Boy, I'm sorry, Dan. It's 20 after 5.
Well, we fortunately don't have a meeting after us anymore.
I know. I'm sorry.
You're violating my rule, though, but that's okay.
I know.
What were you specifically asking?
Haven't we had some discussion about electric vehicle fleet in the near future?
Well, we've been paying attention definitely to other police and fire departments. The smaller SUV-style vehicles in the future are going to be EV. It's a certainty. We have not specifically looked at any EVs in the city of Lawrence yet, but we know that that's coming.
And I would say part of the initial part of this study would be to survey those departments and see what that time likelihood is and where those things might apply.
In larger cities, there are a variety of departments that have implemented EVs for public safety purposes. Right. As close by as Bargersville, Indiana, they're driving Teslas.
So I just want to remind everybody, and I don't mean this offensively, and I value every dollar we spend, but when you look at the way we're spending money, right now, to put $15,000 towards the potential to be the first major community in the metro area to have taken a serious look at the EV solution with the MPO and have at least a draft plan to see if we can, if and when and how we start to view electric, particularly I think, and how that might tie into our trades district initiatives. To me, that's a relatively small ask, and we have a company that's willing to submit the application for us with the help of this commission. I think it's somewhat of a no-brainer, not to be offensive, but that's just where I am with that.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I've said more than enough.
So I'm really asking for permission from this council or commission through some type of motion to allow Tesco to submit an application on behalf of this commission for a grant of up to $75,000 with the Indianapolis MPO.
I'd like to make a comment before we do that. It's just that, of course, EV is here. EV is not coming. EV is here. I'm in my line of work, we already electrification. But there's questions that hasn't been answered, I don't think. I'm not quite sure. 75,000 seems like a low amount for what you're trying to do in their assessment, but I understand that given the match. So I think that makes sense. You write 15,000 to go into, I call this, to be a part of the early adopters. That's not a big cost, but I think I would just need to be more comfortable, like, this is exactly what we have, this is exactly what we're gonna do, and this is why.
Well, I think that comfort will come, though. We're just asking for permission for them to secure the grant. If they do, then we can decide if we're going to submit the match, or I assume it would die. We'd probably never get another grant. But nonetheless, it's at that point, I think where the comfort level, I fully respect everybody here. I think that comfort level is going to come when we issue an RFP and we see the scope of the study that's to result. That's your concern. That's Jerry's concern. What are we going to get for the money once we submit it, and how is it going to help the city? That's a very astute question, but I think that gets answered in phase 2 if the grant's approved, before the work ever starts.
I'd like to make a motion for Tesco indeed to submit a grant and that we would authorize the 15,000 match.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll do a vote by show of hands. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
Now, I think the other thing we need from you is you need to reflect and communicate back to us as you prepare this grant, how much help do you need and who do you need representation from?
Yeah.
And we'll rely on Mr. Clifford to communicate with the other commissioners and figure out who that is and what we need to do. So as they prepare this grant, they're going to want somebody to review it. Maybe that's me, maybe that's a commissioner too. I don't know, but before that application goes in, which is only a week and a half away, we need somebody to at least review that.
15 days.
So you can communicate that back to us.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much for your time. I will tell you that on the back of your package is the Mr. Clifford, back to what is it you're going to do. These are the steps within the assessment. This is the roadmap. Very simple in a one-pager. But I think if you, once you read it and look at it, you'll say, there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting there. And so that's, hopefully that's something you can take away. And we're available. Our contact information's there. We're available for any questions. Please do. And we want to be transparent. We want to be a partner. And right now we're going to go get to work and hopefully secure Lawrence this grant. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So wrapping this meeting up relatively soon, I always want to be sure that we haven't missed anything. With us today, we have Corey Korn, and I know you all know Corey, but she's doing phenomenal work with the city right now relative to parks and recreation and quality of life components. Has been such a great addition to the city, and Dave's taking a new role with leadership and other things. I don't think I made you aware that Dave is trying to tackle and create a blight assessment program for the city of Lawrence and how we deal with blighted properties. That's his new initiative. So is there anything that any of you need to bring to the commission before we adjourn? No? Anything on any other commissioner that wants to bring to the commission? So before I turn it over to President Clifford to adjourn and ask for that adjournment, I again want to thank very much Mr. McGregor and Mr. Klein for your volunteering to service, and we're so glad to have you as part of this group. And I want you to know that we're an open book, and yes, I can be plenty blunt and plenty short, but I don't think you pay me to hear what you want to hear. I think you pay me to tell you what I think you should do, and whether you agree or not, that's up to you, but we're glad to have you here, and sure, thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Clifford, back to you.
Welcome aboard. So are you ready?
I'm done.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Second, please.
Second?
We have
By show of hands. Thank you.
we're adjourned.